you need to understand that we are truly at a crisis moment. The characters for crisis in Chinese are the combination of danger and opportunity, and that's precisely where we are. Steve Bannon said we have a point right now where if we deliver, if the Trump administration delivers, we can change society for a generation. But let me make it clear, there are major changes that are coming down the pike. You don't have to look at the fourth turning to understand that. We've had the globalists talking about all these revolutionary disruptive changes that are going to be happening between 2020 and 2030 for a long time. We got the 2030 agenda for sustainability coming from the United Nations. We had Agenda 21, but then they put a specific time point on it, 2030. We've got self-driving cars where they're going to take over our transportation. That's all part of that sustainability, that part of that Agenda 21 to try to confine us into the cities. They're looking at massive disruption in the employment market. They're looking at a universal basic income. This is an important time. This is why they're now moving, cutting their own economic throat to try to deny us these ads. It's not in their economic interest to do this. They're trying to punish us. They're trying to take down and are taking down our videos, putting our videos on restricted release, as well as blocking our ads. That's why this is so important. That's why I talked about Steve Bannon. That's why it is important, this press conference where the media is pushing this notion to the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, saying, can't we get rid of Steve Bannon now that we got a new security advisor? Can't we get rid of him now? See, they could get a 2-for-1 by getting rid of Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn, who blew the whistle on our government, our CIA, arming al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. That's what they want to do. Now they want to get rid of the guy who is there, who knew this was coming. And there's an interesting article that just came out in the last week from Vice, quoting Steve Bannon, saying the world is on fire. And this was 2 years before his rise to power. This guy said, well, back in September 2014, I went to his house for a party. He was on assignment from Rolling Stone to report about Breitbart, and he was given an invitation to a place that was called the Breitbart Embassy. He said, when I went there, I asked him, why do you call this place the Embassy? And Bannon said, D.C. is like Saigon in '68. You don't know who your friends are and who your enemies are. Well, it's starting to become clear, and I hope that he's got a better read on that now. But it's interesting, at this party, this guy said, well, I didn't recognize many people there, but there was Laura Ingraham, there was Senator Jeff Sessions, there was Nigel Farage. He had never heard of this guy before. He said Nigel Farage got up in typical Nigel Farage style. He referred to then Prime Minister David Cameron as chinless and gutless. Nigel Farage is just such a great orator. He just really nails it. And then he talks about his private dinner with Steve Bannon, who said there is a center-right population throughout the world that is anti-establishment, that is anti the party of Davos. And just think about Ted Malloch, who has now been tipped to be Donald Trump's ambassador to the European Union, who wrote the book, Davos, Aspen, and Yale, My Life Behind the Elite Curtain. And he pointed out the fact that we very much want to have bilateral relations with countries in Europe, but we do not want to strengthen a multilateral globalist organization like the European Union, which is a stepping stone to Brzezinski's trilateral vision of the world, which in itself is a stepping stone to a one world government. Now, if you don't think that all this stuff is happening, just look at all the talk about secession. And of course, it has always been poo-pooed by people on the right. They say, oh, this is nothing but racism. And yet we see this happening quite a bit, don't we, in California? And they're not putting this down. But I want to take a look at a new article that was up on Drudge today. North Carolina's constitutional ban on secession could be dropped under a House bill that has been introduced. And I want you to hear this language. This is in the North Carolina Constitution. Of course, it was not the way the North Carolina Constitution was originally, as part of the 13 states that created a federal government. Later on, they decided they wanted to leave the thing that they had created, just like one day we're going to leave the United Nations. That's going to happen, folks. And be prepared. They're going to come after us when it happens. They're going to call us bad things like secessionists and rebels, which is what they called the Southerners. They didn't call them racist. No, you won't find any of that talk there. They didn't call them slave owners. They called them secesh. That was the thing they didn't like. And when they won the war, they rewrote the Constitution and put this in it. This state shall ever remain a member of the American Union. The people thereof are part of the American nation. There is no right on the part of this state to secede, and all attempts from whatever source or upon whatever pretext to dissolve this union or to sever this nation shall be resisted with the whole power of the state. I want you to look at that in contrast to the Declaration of Independence. You understand that our country was founded on the right of self-government, on the right of secession. It was a Declaration of Independence, wasn't it? They said we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have these rights that we get from God, that we create government to enforce those rights. And when that government becomes destructive of those rights, we have the right and the duty to alter or abolish that government and set up new governments that are going to respect our rights. That was what this was about. That's what the Civil War was about. That was what the Revolutionary War was about. And we had an article yesterday on InfoWars from Lew Rockwell. And he said, let's break up the USA. And he made this case. He said, everyone takes for granted that it's normal for a country of 320 million to be dictated to by a single central authority. The only debate we're permitted to have is who will be selected to carry out this grotesque, inhumane function. Who's our dictator going to be? We have an election every year to decide who the dictator is going to be. And remember, I said that earlier. I said, the left is not happy now. We told them, we warned them when Barack Obama started acting as a dictator. We said, he's setting a precedent. Future presidents will follow that precedent. And now we're seeing it. He said, here's the debate we should be having instead. What if we simply abandoned the quixotic mission and went our separate ways? It's an idea that's gaining traction. Much too late to be sure, but better late than never. For a long time, it seemed as if the idea of secession was unlikely to take hold in modern America. School children, after all, were told to associate secession with slavery and treason. Think about the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? What does it say? One nation, indivisible. The under God wasn't added until the 1950s. The pledge was created during Reconstruction. And when they did the pledge, they held their arm out in a Nazi salute. It was only after the Nazis started using it in the 1930s that they put their hand over their heart. This was a pledge to a government, not a pledge to principles. It was not a pledge to the Constitution or to the Bill of Rights. It was a pledge to an authority that could not be removed. Now he says, yet all it took was the election of Donald Trump for the alleged toxicity of secession to vanish entirely. The left's principled opposition to secession and devotion to the Holy Union went promptly out the window on November the 8th, 2016. Today, about 1 in 3 Californians polled favors the Golden State secession from the Union. They have an organization, yescalifornia.org, and I just want to promote that and say, what can I do to help you leave? Because one of the things that allows me to pursue my own self-government is if you'll leave me alone. We can do this peacefully. This has happened throughout Scandinavia. We had Norway and Sweden go their separate ways. And, of course, Finland was part of that at one point in time. They've had Denmark as part of it. They've decided at various times to peacefully separate and go their own way. You don't have to have a war. We saw this with Czechoslovakia. It broke into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. It can happen, but frequently it doesn't. If we look at the Ukraine, of course, we see in Ukraine, they decide they would leave Russia, but then they denied the right of secession to the Crimeans, who had always been a part of Russia as well. So that's the duplicity that we see with the left, even as they're now saying they want to leave as part of California. They say many have adopted the creepy slogan, not my president. This is Lew Rockwell talking. He says, in other words, I may not want this particular person having the power to intervene in all aspects of my life and holding in his hands the ability to destroy the entire earth, but I most certainly do want someone else to have that power. Really? Do you really want that? Think about this for a moment. This is a point at which we could have the left and right come together and say, let's decide about how we're going to govern ourselves instead of fighting over who's going to be the dictator.
In case you haven't heard, InfoWars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. InfoWars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of The Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the InfoWars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. InfoWars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the InfoWars store that are only available for InfoWars Prime subscribers. That's InfoWars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.